Hi, it's Kathy from Bishopstone Yarns, and I'd like to welcome you all here to this episode 28 of the Bishopstone Yarns podcast. And as I was saying, my name is Kathy, and I am coming to you from Tasmania, which is the little island at the south of Australia. And you find me at the moment in the corner of my studio. And today, I'm recording this one a little bit in segments. So I have already recorded a segment on my spinning and my finished spin. And also I go through and talk about what the dyes that I've used to dye the different skeins for my jumper. And so this would usually be coming out on September the 19th. So at the moment it's a couple of days before that. And on Monday, of course, it's going to be the Queen's funeral. So I didn't think I would get a chance to record this on that day. I'm not really quite sure what to say really about, I was going to say it was a shock, but it was probably maybe when someone is 96, it's not that much of a shock that someone passes away, but it is still very sad and very, it's a lot to kind of take in a way that someone like the Queen, who has been around my entire life, and I have only ever known having a queen, even though we're in Australia, and the Queen is still the Queen of Australia. And so I have been watching all the coverage and watching watching what's been evolving and what's happening. And I must say, on the first few days after the Queen died, I did shed quite a few tears. I did find it very moving and very sad, but there's also something very comforting about watching the parades and watching the history behind the parades and the different steps that are taken between, her dying and then proclaiming the new king. And so I thought I would record this early and then I'll put it up on YouTube later, because as I was saying, I'll be watching the funeral on Monday, and even though in Australia it's Monday, it'll be Monday evening when they're showing the funeral. But yes, I don't think that I will be doing any recording or anything on Monday or putting this up on YouTube on Monday. So we'll wait and see. We'll have a look and see what happens and when I get this up online. But so I guess I should go back and do a few of my formalities, and then we'll have a little chat, and then you can watch the video that I made earlier about my spinning. So as I was saying, I'm Kathy from Bishopstone Yarns, and you can find me on Facebook as Bishopstone Yarns. You can find me on Instagram as Bishopstone Yarns, and you can find me on Ravelry as Bishopstone. I also have a blog which as Bishopstone Yarns on Blogger, which I use occasionally. I don't kind of update it all the time, but I do put some things on there. So they're the places around the internet where you can find me. So I guess that's probably enough of an introduction for the moment. Sorry about the light here at the moment. It is a really overcast kind of day at the moment, and a little bit drizzly and a little bit hard to find the light for this. But I hope you're all well. I hope for those of you in the UK, you're all well and not too emotional, or that you're coping okay with the emotions. And I guess for the rest of the people around the world, because the Queen was someone who touched absolutely every corner of the world. And yes, I hope you're all well. I hope that you're finding some time to do some crafting, and that that's able to give you some peace and some joy as well at this point in time. I know that I've been doing a bit of sewing, and I've been doing a bit of knitting, and I know that I haven't been concentrating particularly well on my knitting because I did have to rip that back and start again with my knitting. But we can talk. I'll talk about that in the next episode when I talk about my next episode will be a knitting episode. So that'll be in 2 weeks' time. So I can talk to you about that then. But I just wanted to pop in and say I hope that everyone's doing well. I hope everyone's looking after themselves. And yeah, and maybe next time we can also have a bit more of a chat about what everyone else has been up to, how everyone's feeling and things like that. But for now, I'll show you what I've been spinning and what I've been up to. And don't forget, if you like this video, give it press the like button. And if you haven't subscribed, if you could subscribe, that would be great, because that helps me out on this part of the YouTubes. And I'll see you all later. Hi, it's Kathy from Bishopstone Yarns, and I'd like to welcome you here to episode 28 of the Bishopstone Yarns podcast. And as I was saying earlier, my name is Kathy, and this is a crafting podcast. I do one week I do a mainly knitting and sewing podcast, and then in the next podcast that I do is usually more about spinning, and then today is mainly about spinning. And so I thought I would introduce everyone to me and to my spinning, and you can see what I've been up to. It is the Monday, September the 19th, and I have I've been doing this podcast for a little while, but for those people who are new to the channel, I'd like to say hi and welcome. And if you like the episode, please click on the thumbs up, give me the like. And if you haven't subscribed already, it would be great if you could subscribe, because of course that helps me out in this little area of the YouTubes. And for those returning viewers, hi, it's great to see you again. I love spending time with you. Thank you very much for coming back and sharing this little bit of crafting time with me. I always love to see people's comments and read people's comments and hear what they've been doing, what they think about what I'm doing, or just sharing any kind of crafting comments with me. That's great. So I'd like to welcome you all here. Sit down, relax, get some crafting ready, and hopefully you can enjoy a little bit of relaxing crafting time while I do a little bit of talking about my spinning. And then when I finish talking about what I've been spinning and dyeing, then we'll do some spinning. But first of all, if you want to know where to find me around the internet, you can find me on Facebook as Bishopstone Yarns. You can find me on Instagram as Bishopstone Yarns. You can find me on Ravelry as Bishopstone. And I also have a blog on Blogger called Bishopstone Yarns. I don't use the blog as much as I used to, but yeah, I still do post some things up there. I think that's about it really. I'm coming to you from Tasmania, which is the little island to the south of Australia, and you find me at the moment in the corner of my studio. So what I'm going to start with today is I'm going to kind of go through my hand spun yarn, which I have hand dyed. Now what I'm wanting to do with this spinning is to knit up the Birkin by Caitlin Hunter. And so during July, which for those people who are on Ravelry and Spinners would have known, or those people who've listened to my previous podcasts, you'll know that July, I spent most of July spinning along with the Tour de Fleece. And the Tour de Fleece is an online spinning event that people can choose to join along through Ravelry, and you kind of spin each day along with the Tour de France cyclists. So as they're having their race, we have a little challenge set for ourselves of spinning each day with the Tour de Fleece. And this year my challenge to myself was to try and spin up as much as I could towards spinning up enough that I would have a sweater's worth of spun yarn. And I have got there, I've got enough actually spun, hopefully for almost 2 jumpers, 2 of the Birkin. So one will be the one with the dark body and a lighter coloured yoke, and the other one will be a dark light body with colourful yoke. And I have shown the pictures of the Caitlin Hunter Birkin over and over again. I've talked about it on so many of my podcasts. I'm sure that everyone is getting a little bit sick and tired of hearing about it. But as I was saying in the last episode, it does take a long time when you start with a raw fleece and you prepare it and you card it and make sure you've got it ready. And in my case, I was blending some wool with alpaca. So that process, and then going along to spinning it up, hand spinning it, and then once I had hand spun enough, then the final process was going out and dyeing it. And so that's what I'm going to show you today. In previous episodes of Sit and Spin, I have gone through and I've explained how much each skein weighed. So I'm not going to go back through that. I'm not going to really talk about the weight of each skein, but I will go through and show you the results of my dyes. So because I was using wool and alpaca in my skeins, I have dyed all of these with landscape dyes, which are a powder-based dye. And then what you do is you mix the dye up. You get the amount of the powdered dye, you mix it up with some water, dissolve it, and then you put it into a big vat of water, bring that to the boil, and then just keep it just underneath the boil, and then you put your yarn in and dye it. Well, that's how I have dyed these skeins. There are other ways that you can dye skeins, which I have done in the past, like using a microwave and things like that. But for this project and doing this jumper, because I had large numbers of skeins that I wanted to dye with the same colour, it was easier for me to have a big pot of water with dye and then put my skeins into that. I did actually, I have 7 skeins in the first blue colour lot. So of course I didn't put 7 skeins into one big pot. I just did lots of two skeins at a time, and then added more dye and then put another 2 skeins in. So the first colour that I used was a blue called Apollo Bay, and you have to remember this is on a brown base, so the initial natural colour of the skein was brown. So when you over dye like a brown or a grey natural fleece, you're going to end up with a slightly different colour as if you were dyeing just onto a white fleece. So this was one of the skeins for using Apollo Bay. So this is going to be the colour for the main part, if you can kind of imagine the Kate and Hunter jumper. Birkin is similar. It's has solid colour for the main part of the jumper, and then it has a coloured yoke pattern. So this is going to be the main colour, and I will show you all 7 of these. Now these skeins do vary a little bit in colour because I guess just the fleece itself was not uniform, and I carded it together with a white alpaca. So there are some bits that are slightly whiter, some bits are slightly darker, some bits are slightly more brown than other bits of the fleece. That's just naturally occurs in a fleece. You won't get a uniform colour with a fleece. And so there is a little bit of variation, but not enough to worry me. So I'll just take these out one at a time and I'll show you. So there's one skein. And this one, which is much more, you can see a lot more of the grey. Kind of like this, has a lot more of a browny kind of grey colour showing through. You can probably see there the difference between the light and the dark. So this one is also a slightly browner colourway as well. I have another one that has a bit more of a brown colourway. Then we've gone back to a more of a darker blue. I'll pop that one over there. And what have we got there? So that's 5 already, and there's the 6. So this one I would put over here as a bit more of a, push this along so you can see them, and this one as well. You can see a little bit more of the, my camera focusing there. You can see a little bit more there of the brown in that. So I guess I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are more of a browner blue colour, and then 2 that are slightly more, I guess, more of a blue. It's taken a lot more of the blue dye than the others. So I've got a decision. I can either decide to start with the darker ones at the top and graduate down to a lighter colour, or I might choose to go with the browner shades for the body and the 2 darker shades for the sleeves. Or I don't know, I'm not sure. I'll wait and see. I'll have a think about it. So as I was saying, the Birkin has a yoked colour in design in the top, and so I had another 2 brown skeins, which I have then over dyed with the landscape dye Tasman, which is kind of a greeny bluey. I think actually I think of it as to me it reminds me of like a 1950s kind of acry bluey green colour. So that is this one here. So you can see very much, especially with this one because it's this lighter colour, that the white of the alpaca has picked up a lot more of the colour than the brown. You can still see a little bit of the brown. The brown kind of shows through. I don't know if you can see there or not. So you can still see a little bit of the brown, but the bits that are have more alpaca in it, or just the alpaca fibres have shown up a lot more. So that's one skein of that, and there's the second skein of this. So what I am hoping for will be a little bit like this. We'll have the blue and the yoke, so it'll still be the main part of the jumper and the yoke and the main part of the jumper. Then maybe graduating down to either the light, or I may do the lighter blue and the green and then the dark for the sleeves. I'm not sure. But I think there is enough contrast between these 2 colours to be able to show off the yoke pattern for the Birkin. Well, that's my plan. So there is my, I'll move these all up here. That is my dark version of the Birkin by Caitlin Hunter. So then I had also been spinning up. So when the Tour de France finished, there was a week at the end of that, there was a week-long spinning tour where the women were racing. So while the women were racing, I decided to spin up some of this gorgeous oatmeal colour, which is a very, very light brown, and I thought this would look really nice as the pale version of the Birkin. So that would be the body, and then I would go for a colourful yoke. So they're natural. These are the natural colours from the fleece, and so these are all this one here is a merino cross that used to be our sheep. The brown, they're the bases. The bases of the brown here are Tasmanian Morat base, which I have bought from a lady I know who lives not very far away from me, who has a flock of the Tasmanian Morat sheep, and the Morat just being a brown sheep, yeah, brown fleece. So then I have these two for the light color, and then I have dyed 3 colors here to go with in the yoke. So I have used dusk for this pink. I'm not sure if the camera is going to pick up the pink color. Maybe if I come back a little bit further. So this is actually a very light pink. If the camera doesn't really pick up the nice pink color. This is the Tasman, the same one that I used here. And this one has got the brown. This one is on a white base. So this is the Tasman. And I was about to say, if I hold these up, you can see the difference in the color. So this has got the white, the white fleece base, and this one has got the brown base, but the same dye, the same amount of dye, same way, but different bases. So that one is the Tasman. And then I used alfalfa to get a nice green. Now this is slightly greener than the camera is actually kind of showing. It doesn't really want to show it off. Maybe it shows it off a little bit better there. So here are my 3 colors. So the Tasman, the alfalfa, and the dusk. And excuse me, I had a small amount of blue left over from the Danish shawl that I was knitting. I may add a little bit of that blue in as well if I feel that it might need a little bit extra color. And then I have this pale color. The only thing I have to think about with this jumper is that I'm hoping that I have enough of this white oatmeal color for the body. So I've got actually 5 skeins of that, and then I've got these 3 colors here. So these will be, well, let me see if I can we show it off maybe this way. So I've got the blue, the Tasman, the dusk, and the alfalfa. I'm not sure if you can see all those together, and with the white base. So this will be the dark Birkin, and this will be the light Birkin. Whew! So that in itself was quite a bit of dyeing. The ratio that I used here was I have a hot plate, just a single hot plate that I plug in, electric hot plate. I have a dyeing pot, which is about this big, and I can't tell you exactly how much water I put in there, but I fill that up. I then get 1 teaspoon of landscape dye powder. I dissolve that with a little bit of water, and then I put it into the big pot, bring it to the boil, then bring it down to just under a boil to a bit of a simmer, and then I put 2 skeins, and then I put a skein in. So if I put 2 skeins into the water, I will put 2 teaspoons of the powder, and that I kept that consistent across all the colours and for all the dyeing that I did here for this jumper. So basically for each skein I had 1 teaspoon of landscape dye into a big pot full of water. The big pot that I do have a very large pot which I can do more numbers of skeins, but at this time I was just doing 2 at a time, which was, I thought, a lot more manageable, and considering that I only had, like some of these colours, I only had 1 skein at a time to do. So I have enough water in that pot, so when I have 2 skeins in there, they are covered and they are floating within the dye, totally covered. So that's basically how I went about dyeing these. And then of course, while I was out there and dyeing, and we had a couple of really lovely warm days, so we've just come into the start of spring. So this was done just, I think, a couple of days before spring. So it was a lovely warm day. I was able to do some dyeing, hang these up, rinse these out, hang them up, and get them dried in a couple of days. Doing it in winter, even though, because we are on tank water, so even in winter, because we've got lots and lots of water in winter, but it takes so much longer to actually dry the skeins. So it's really nice to be able to get that balance where we've got lots of water, so I can use water for the dyeing, but also the weather is good enough that my skeins will actually dry in a couple of days, because there's nothing worse than having wet skeins just kind of hanging around waiting, a week or something to dry. So once I got all of these done, I found I still had some dye left, and so sometimes when you have some dye left over, it's called an exhaust dye. So it's dye still in the pot, but it's not as strong as these ones here. So what I then did was I had some white commercial yarn, which I have no idea what it is. It's just some sort of wool that I had in my stash, and I used the leftover of the Tasman here to dye this skein. This is, I was going to say it's probably a 10 ply. And so there was my commercial skein of Tasman, and so that's used from the exhaust, so that's just the leftover dye after I had finished dyeing this one here. And then I had some other brown skeins which I wanted to dye up, so I used the landscape dye colour Gala. Now Gala is a really, really bright, for those people who live in Australia or know Australian birds, if you can think of the parrot that we have that's a galah with the bright pink and the grey, well, Gala, the dye Gala gives you a very, very similar kind of pink. So this was brown over dyed with Gala. So I had, I'm not quite sure where to put it. So I had one, and then, oh, actually, no, we'll do this in order. So I've got, here we go, 3 skeins of Gala, of the brown dyed with Gala. Put that up a little bit closer, hello. So you can see the brown and the pink, and oh, I'm about to say here's a little bit of very very gallah-y pink color here. And so they were 3 that I had used, and then I had 2 big skeins of the brown that I wasn't really happy with the plying, but I used a bit of Gala on those. So this was getting down into the exhaust, so the leftover dye for these. And then the last thing I did was I had a little bit of Gala dye left over, and I had 2 balls of white yarn, white commercial yarn wool, and I decided to dye those still in the cake, so they were caked up in a so not in a ball but in a cake. And then I used these and I dyed them up that way. So you can see there's some variation. There's a little bit of white left that's probably kind of towards the center of the ball of the cake, and this was the other one. So, and once again, the camera's not really showing it. These are a lot pinker, a lot more of a lolly pink kind of color than the camera's actually showing them up. But I do like the variations. The reason that I left these in the ball, in the caked up ball, when I dyed them, was because I wanted a little bit of interest, a little bit of color changing. I was actually hoping that would gradiate a little bit more from being darker on the outside to the lighter on the inside, but it didn't do that this time. But I did end up with some of the white pieces there as well. So that was using Landscape Gala. And that is all of the dyeing. Oh no, well, it's not all of the dyeing. I did dye up a little bit of fleece. I might just pop over and grab some of that. Okay, I'm back again. I've just popped over and got a bit of the fleece that I had dyed. When I had finished dyeing the blue here for the with the the Apollo Bay landscape dye, I had some alpaca that I had, so I thought I would use the exhaust from the blue of the Apollo to dye up some beautiful alpaca. So this was the alpaca that used up. So you can see, let's see if I can get one of these skeins here to show you. You can see the big difference. So when you first go and dye yarn, the first lot, when you put the dye in, the wool takes up most of the dye. But you're usually left, not always, but usually, sometimes you're left with a tiny bit of the dye left. So this was so this is the exhaust. So this is the leftover dye from this kind of this dye lot. So that was the alpaca that I used. And then I had when I had dyed the Gala, I had put some more Gala in and had dyed this wool. So here's some fleece. So this is dried, but I haven't teased this apart or pulled it apart. Let's say I can come up really close and show you. Well, I don't know that it's going to, doesn't want to focus, does it? But it is very, very bright. It's a very Gala pink. And I can't wait. I can't wait to spin some of this up. That's going to be absolutely gorgeous. And then the last one was I had a little bit of the dusk, which is this kind of pinky, very, very light pink purple color. Oh, I don't know what you call it. Very light pink. So, and then I had, whoop, there's a bit of the blue there. I had a little bit of wool left over, and maybe, I don't know if you can see the difference. So this was at full strength, and this was the leftover or the exhaust. So there isn't a great deal of difference actually in the colour between those two. This one will need to have, you know, go through the carder and be carded out. This is just as it was. It had been washed and dyed, and then it's just dried like this. I haven't teased this out or done anything with it, so it needs a bit of work before I can actually think about doing any spinning. But that is the last of the dyeing that I have been doing. I think that's everything I've dyed. I mean, I do like dyeing, and it's really enjoyable. And sometimes I feel like I just want to keep going and keep putting more things in and dye more and more. But yep, I'm very happy with what I've done. And now that I have shown you what I have dyed here, I am also able to probably start knitting the Birkin and start on my new jumper. So that will be very exciting. I'm very excited about that. I can't wait to start knitting it and seeing how these colours work, and hopefully these two colours, or even if I use the more grayer blue, hopefully these two will have enough of a contrast that they will show up the pattern really well. I'm really looking forward to having a blue jumper. Well, I hope you've enjoyed hearing me talk about my spinning and my dyeing, and I hope that everyone else who's working on some spinning or some dyeing, I hope you've been having fun. I hope you've been enjoying what you've been doing. And then so next episode that I do in 2 weeks will be a knitting podcast, mainly about knitting and sewing. And hopefully I'll be able to show you some of the jumper. I've started it. And then the next one after that, in another 2 weeks, so like in a month's time, the next sit and spin, I will hopefully be onto something totally different. No more brown, no more white. Hopefully I'll be able to be doing something nice and colourful. So I look forward to seeing you all then. Bye.